All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 13 of Christ Over Fear. I am your host, Chad Jenkins, and I am excited today for a couple of reasons. One, I have an announcement. I actually told Connor right before here, we did a quick comms check and the announcement today that I didn't even tell him yet. But he's like, hey, man, I know how it is. I know how it is starting off podcasts. Happy to be a guest. And that's just it. I think a lot assume that Christ Over Fear is a podcast, and it actually is not, in fact, a podcast yet. It's only on YouTube. It's only on the YouTube channel. But in order to hold myself accountable, probably the only way to get my butt off the ground to do it and to actually put it in a platform that can be hosted on podcast platforms is, yes, we are going to migrate and actually have these episodes where they are on all of your your podcasts forums that you go to. So that will be soon. It holds me accountable. I make the announcement officially on this live episode of episode 13. So hopefully it's soon. I want it to be soon. I have all of the actual audio files from all of our previous episodes, including this one that we'll have today, to dump those in. So maybe I can ask Connor about that. So that's the big announcement for this episode. And then the bigger announcement is I get to have Connor Crehan on this episode today. So Connor and I are Army football brothers. Actually, I was a graduate assistant at West Point when Connor was a freshman quarterback. So we both played quarterback at Army. I got to coach him up. So we'll decide if he gets to call me Coach or Chad today on this episode. We'll see. I'm seeing a smile from him already. But Connor then went ahead and was a field artillery officer in the United States Army, deployed to Iraq as a field artillery officer. And then ever since he got back, he's been doing unbelievable things in the New York City area, New York, New Jersey area, went into financial investment, financing, banking, and also kind of, I don't want to say a side hustle, but a simultaneous venture is he is the co-host of Zero Blog 30, a very successful military veteran podcast on Barstool Sports. So we'll ask him about that. And he is not newly, but his newest professional endeavors is the federal government business development guru for UniteUS, a company started by Taylor Justice, another Army football brother. So we'll ask him about that as well. But without further ado, what is up, my man?
What's going on, buddy? I gotta say,
do you get to call me Coach or no?
I don't even know if I called you Coach then.
No, you didn't. For a plebe freshman, you had a lot of confidence.
It certainly did, but I think you probably insisted we call you Chad because you didn't want to feel like an old dude.
That could have been.
That's where that came from.
That might have been it.
I gotta say, every time I see you posting these videos, my first thought is, damn, his hair looks perfect every time.
How is it today? How is it?
Looks great, man.
Yeah,
it looks amazing. Yeah, I would say it's fantastic.
Dude, we're live and we're on video, man. Hair and makeup is a must. You know that, dude.
Yeah, true.
What about the Fox News? Tell everybody the Fox News trick I taught you.
Oh yeah, you gotta sit on your tail of your jacket so it doesn't bunch up in the shoulders.
That was a good one. You liked that one, didn't you?
I did, yeah, because I realized after the fact when I saw myself on pictures that, oh man, he's so right. I look like a schlep, like I've never done this before because I hadn't. So now I'll remember that anytime I do another TV hit.
Well, the hunched jacket shoulder look it's not a good look, man.
No, it makes you look like a newbie, like you've never done this before. So you gotta go in with the correct appearance. Well,
speaking of newbies, though, I'm newbie on this end, and you ought to be hosting. Maybe you can ask some interview questions throughout. But are you still doing Zero Blog 30? How's that going?
Yes.
And yeah.
Yes, it's going very well. And as a matter of fact, I just texted our group yesterday because I was kind of curious how many episodes we're at, and we're at 457. We've been going since September of 2016, and the show has morphed and changed and gone in a lot of different directions, but it's obviously always been focused on our military and our veterans. So we are getting ready, coming up on 500 episodes, and I can't believe that it's been that many. when I look back and think about all the people we've had an opportunity to speak with, and the great men and women who have served in our military, some politicians, and everything in between. It's really been such a blessing to have that platform and to reach veterans in that way. So I applaud you for what you're doing here with this show, because I think, most everybody has a good story to tell, and it's just a matter of putting it out there. And I commend you for taking on this latest endeavor, because you're also, I feel like you're taking on something new every time I see you. So what was the purpose and the impetus for starting this show?
That's an awesome question, man. And I will glean like knowledge through you, which I love, because I love listening to you, because you're just like, you're the tagline of this show: raw, transparent, real. What you see is what you get, but in a good way, in a heartfelt way, which I love. And I think that's really to morph what you said about, Zero Blog 30 and the combat veteran community. That's what Christ Over Fear is about. And then diving it into more specific, like being more of a niche, and really having it be the spiritual side and the Christ side of it. Because I think right now, there's a huge talk on mental health, on emotional knowledge, emotional well-being, on our physical health. And I think the spiritual health, or the talk of, where people are, whether on it, whether not on it, whether good, bad, or indifferent. I think those conversations can spark dialogue, especially in the combat veteran community. So I think it's one that's not had all that often, and I'm passionate about it. Maybe I wear it too much on my sleeve. It's just the way I am, and I can't help it. I love like the media. I love interview process. I love like Fox News hits or things of that. And I love that. So I'm like, all right, well, it's not like they're calling each and every day and wanting to say, hey, Chad, let's sign you. So like, all right, let's start on what I'm passionate about, what I love. And really what it's done for me, Connor, is it's reinvigorated my faith, really, when I get to have guys like you and previous guests. Adam Clack, last week's guest, he was a Ranger of mine in 2nd Ranger Battalion. Haven't seen him since 2007. Haven't talked to him since 2007. That kid came on and was on fire for the Lord, poured his heart out. And it's just like, that's awesome. And I also think the combat veteran community can be the community to knock down the barriers of mental health, but also the spiritual dialogue that I think we do need to have, whether it doesn't need to be perfect. And it's an uncomfortable conversation sometimes. It can be uncomfortable, which is okay, but let's have it at least.
Right. And I think that's what you just said. It really hits the nail on the head, that it is uncomfortable, whether it's about your faith, and faith comes in many different shapes and sizes, and how you practice that faith and how vocal you are or not vocal you are. I don't think there's a right way or a wrong way. And then that also coincides with that mental health aspect. And I think the fact that it is uncomfortable maybe lets you know that you should be having it, right? Because
that's a good point.
If all the conversations we had were just easy, how would that allow us to grow? And how would that allow us to become better individuals for ourselves, for the folks in our lives? So I think it is important to have those conversations. And then also, one of the things we try to really hammer home, intentionally, unintentionally on our show, when we talk about mental health as an example, is showing that it's okay to talk about it. And we've been given this platform, and we're so lucky to have that platform, thanks to Barstool. And it really goes such a long way when people just hear other people talking about it, and that maybe helps them get going in that right direction. So that's just a long way of saying I see what you're getting at here, and I think it's fantastic that you're doing this for yourself, for the veteran community, and for whomever else that you may be doing this for.
Well, I appreciate that, dude. No, that means a lot. And like I said, before we have a Chad Connor love fest, which I'm okay with, that's cool.
But yeah, we both enjoy that.
We totally will. Until I hit this next topic, that it's gonna. Yeah. You think what we just talked about was a little uncomfortable? What we're getting ready to talk about is even going to be more uncomfortable. Who's better at golf?
Ooh, I don't know. I haven't seen you on the course in quite some years. You've been ducking me at the annual tournament.
I know.
It's tough to tell. I don't know where your game's at, but the last time I was playing with you, it was pretty good. So it could be could be a good match if we were able to get out there on the course together. But
I know. I was
again,
thinking about that. We need to get you. I need to get you here for like a little member guest action,
okay,
huh? And then we can
yeah,
have Army football quarterbacks just smoke everyone.
I would fully support that. I'm always looking for a new place to play. So just let me know when and where, and I'll get myself there.
All right, I love it.
Mhm.
But to follow up on your point too, I think, and that's what I think the veteran community and military is doing a better job is having the mental health conversation, right? And
Mhm.
making that where it's less and less stigmatized, and not that it maybe it probably was stigmatized a couple a generation ago,
Mhm.
and I've said that before. The biggest person to put the stigma on mental health before I went and sought it out was myself, right? Like
Yes.
I was the
Yes.
one who was. It wasn't other people like, oh, what are you doing? I mean, maybe here and there, but not nearly as much as what I was putting on it. Now that that barrier has been done, that's another reason for Christ over fear is like, okay, let's take it to the spiritual aspect. I think there's, physical, mental, emotional, and then the spiritual. That's the holistic approach of all of us. Not that we can't talk about emotional and physical and mental on this show, because we do almost each and every week, but it's with the spiritual being the main effort, if you will, for a military term, because I've been on, maybe even on, when I came on Zero Blog 30, and maybe there's an opportunity where I throw a one-liner in there, like, I love Jesus, or like, not that cheesy, but like,
Yeah.
I mention my faith, but it's a one-liner in an hour segment, where here I wanted it to be the long portion, and then all the others are kind of like, complementary to that fact. And
Mhm.
I've had guys on here, Mike Burke, one of my platoon sergeants in 2nd Ranger Battalion. He's like, Chad, I'm not, like, I'm in the winter of my faith. Like, I don't know where I am. Like, I thought I believed, now I don't know. And like, he was raw and transparent, and people need to hear that too. They need to hear that they're not alone in that approach either. And maybe they're not there yet and they have questions, and that's what this is for. It's not like the cheesy, like, oh, hey, if you're not, you need to get down and pray right now, and if you're not, you're
Yeah.
going to hell. Like, it's not
Right.
that, because I remember the Omari Thompsons. I remember the Eris Comos. I remember the guys who had the faith in the locker room, and
Mhm.
it wasn't to point their finger at me, it was to love me. And and it was a great beacon to see what they had that I was missing, to then years later come around and finally have it and have that personal relationship. Then I'm like, man, that they did it the right way. And that's how we do it, is by telling it, by you being able to share your story wherever that is. People hear our stories and they're not being told what they need to do, but they're told
Mhm.
how it helped us. Man,
Right.
that will invigorate others, I think.
Yeah, and I know, for me, I think it really, just spending time in church and having that relationship with God, like, supplemented everything else that I was doing to try to get my mental health better. And it was not meant to be, hey, this is a cure all. Like, if I just, reinvigorate myself towards God and faith, but a good supplement for me. Cause also too, like, you talk about those guys you mentioned who are awesome, awesome guys. And that was never me. Growing up, it was never, even I went to Catholic school from the time I was in pre-K to senior year at high school. So it was always part of the topic of conversation. It was always, learning about religion in school, but maybe my Irish Catholic upbringing was more reserved, and we didn't talk about it, and we didn't talk about anything, so to speak. So maybe that was part of the reason
Are
my
you talking
mental
about like
health
in the
journey.
household or out
Yeah,
yeah.
no, it was, growing up, it was just, we practicing Catholics and
Yeah.
going to church every Sunday, and as an altar server, and it was a very big part of our lives. But it was during that time on Sunday, and then not really anywhere else during the week was it discussed. And I've come around in later years and had more conversations with my mother specifically about it. But I'm curious to hear, because you mentioned a couple guys, and you mentioned Army football, and this is kind of a two-part question, and I'll start with the first part. How much of your mental health journey was impeded by the fact that you were an Army football player? And by that, I mean, for me, it was, well, I got to be the toughest guy in the room because everybody knows I was an Army football player, and that carries with it a certain attitude, and I don't want to let all these other guys down. So there's no way I can have problems with my mental health. I got to be mentally tough. I've been through hard times, and if I'm not mentally tough, then I'm going to be letting all these guys down. And that was a real barrier in my head that I had to get over. I mean, was that something that you had to deal with as well?
Wow. Yes. Yes. Army football played a factor. And then I also think, well, I mean, what was our tagline,
Yeah,
national champions of mental toughness.
right.
And I hate the word toughness, like mental toughness. Um, and I'm obviously not a psychologist. It's the school of hard knocks. That's where I come from. On going through and doing all the work of mental health therapy with a psychologist, but I like mental elasticity. I like that word a lot better than toughness, because toughness and especially in young men who are driven and who are the alphas, type A personality. We hear toughness, and that kind of correlates to like physical toughness, which there is a level of mental toughness. But I think there's the elasticity where if we could be taught and really educate the youth now today, hey, there is a time and a place on the football field. And when you're in the heat of the moment, and then what you're getting ready to train for to be in the military, there is that ultimate time that you have to shut off all of those things, emotions, feelings, regard for self, all of those things to focus on the mission at hand. Absolutely. Whether it's Saturday afternoon in Mikey or whether it's on a battlefield on a foreign land.
Mm-hmm.
But that we need to swing over is after that's done, after that mission set's done, that 60 minutes expires, we need to then be able to regulate our emotions back, regulate the thought process, the feelings that we had. I mean, I can remember, it wasn't just combat that set the conditions for PTSD. There was a bunch of precursors in my life starting in childhood that led up to those critical moments, those critical events, as Brad Wadby came over here and kind of defined what a critical incident or critical event is. But leading up to that point, could I have learned and been a little bit more open to understand how to regulate and how to share those emotions in a healthy environment, so that then I was better on the football field? Because I remember having being completely irritated and pissed off, and I will say shame, if I threw an interception, if I threw a pick six, in my head, and that actually wasn't a healthy place for me to be to get back into the game.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that answers my long-winded question, or my
No,
long-winded answer.
No, it does. And I think, that's part of that first. It's one thing, I think, for just anybody, but then you consider your upbringing, you consider your background, and I think that just compounds everything. So then, my follow-on next question is then, as it pertains to your faith, what did you see then as the barrier? Because I'll say, from my perspective, I didn't know this side of you when I was a freshman, and years after, when I'd see you around at various social events or games or whatever. It wasn't until I think you and I just were texting and really kind of got into it that I discovered this side of you. So was that something that was always there and you just didn't feel comfortable putting it out there, or was it something that you discovered later on?
Geez, I mean, just write that down, and I'll write that down, because I'm gonna ask you the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that would be a good way of hearing your answer to that question as well. Mine, and I'll try to keep it brief. So didn't grow up in church, did read read little Bible stories as a kid, my sisters and I with my mom and dad, but nothing formal whatsoever. And then really it wasn't until Anthony Miller died at West Point. When Anthony passed, and Anthony, for everybody, he was a wide receiver on our football team and died of an infection, kind of an infection in February of 2002, and I was a senior. Anthony was a sophomore, but we were in the same company. And Anthony was my boy. I mean, that kid was like he was my man. I took it. I looked out for him. I mean, it was almost like a big brother, little brother relationship. And Anthony was big on his faith then. He would do Bible study. I remember him always carrying his Bible and going like on like Wednesday evenings to go do a Bible study, even on at West Point. And it was when his pastor got up and we went to Anthony's funeral, and his pastor just came off the top ropes. I mean, like straight up, like just off the top ropes. And I mean, I can't describe it other than it was definitely the Holy Spirit. They're like, because he did like an altar call to like people to come up. And I remember standing up, and Zick and Dotson are both looking at me. They're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Dude, I don't know." And I start walking up there, and like he had to like, I mean, because it was the whole football team and a bunch of cadets that went to Virginia. We bust down. And I remember like that's where he like, had us come up to accept Christ. And I did that. And I say that now, I even years ago, up until 2017, I wouldn't tell anybody this story. I wouldn't share it because even then, and that was 2002, like it was a mustard seed. It was such a mustard seed. And then I went back to my seat and like, didn't live my life for Christ whatsoever. I was still, I say 99.5% heathen, 0.5% Christian. Right. And then, but just the years and years and years, Emily, my wife, she brought me along really deeply because she was committed to Bible study and just doing her, like she would be doing like reading the Bible, doing all this stuff. And I would like tease her and make fun. Like, what are you doing? And like, she's like, you ought to try this, but she never pushed me, never pressed it on me. And then, so when I got a little bit further along we were in the FBI, I was in the FBI, we were down in Florida. And then, October 22nd, 2011, I got the news that my former fire support non-commissioned officer, Chris Domay, was killed in Afghanistan that night. And that's when I was going to church and I was really starting to kind of really ask questions and discern and look at that. And that brought me to my knees, and that because I couldn't figure that one out at all. But then, his last post on Facebook 2 weeks prior to him being killed was Isaiah 6:8. And then the Lord asked, who shall we send? Who shall go for us? And I said, here am I, send me. And I didn't know that about Chris. I didn't know he had any faith. And we were boys. My last two deployments, we were together at the hip. And I didn't know that. And then finally, 2017, personal blow up, personal explosion, self-implosion on my end that really got me to finally get to the VA. I started having suicidal thoughts, never had those except for like in like middle school time frame. And then those came and I couldn't handle it. And that's when I tapped out and said, all right, you have all of me now. You have all of me, Lord. I'm giving everything to you, my good, my bad, my ugly. And then when I did that, that's when really it's like, there's a scripture in the gospel. It's Jesus says, I am in you and you are in me. And I think that it is a two-way street. Like, hey, if we're not into him, if we're not seeking him, he'll be quiet. He'll be like, all right, go on about your business. But when you're ready to come to me fully, then I'll take you. And I think 2017, Connor, is probably when you saw me wear it a little bit more on my sleeve because I know what he did for me in that moment and how much he showed up. And I think at that point, it was like, I know that he is real, that he loves me, that he's got me. And it really reset my priorities of like, trying to still not do it offensively, trying to still not be the guy that's on the street corner being like, if you don't accept Christ, you're going to hell forever, but doing it to your point, however it is, how he places each one of them. We're all uniquely created in his image, right? And so however he has it for me or has it for you or whoever else, but to walk my walk how it is. And I think that's what finally has led to, the launch of this in 2022. So
no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I mean, I relate to that part about talking about your wife. Because my own wife has been a part of that for me as well, where she encouraged me because it was a thing where, again, I've been going to church on Sundays since, I can have a memory in my head.
And let's do that, Connor. You take us through your walk right now, kind of where you are, how you got there from, Catholic upbringing at school and going to, and you said all the way until 8th grade, you went to the Catholic?
All the way through high school.
Oh, you did all the way through. Okay. K through 12. So
K through 12 all the way.
So
it was always kind of like, it's always there. And I mean, I'll tell you a quick story. Fourth grade is when you were old enough at my grammar school to go become an altar boy, and it was just something that you did. And I remember going into eighth grade, I decided I just don't want to do it anymore because sometimes you get put on the schedule for like 7:30 a.m. mass on Sunday, and you're like, I don't want to get up for that. So I tell my parents, I'm like, I'm not gonna be an altar boy anymore in eighth grade. And my dad said, all right, but how many football games have you lost the last 2 years? I said, none. He goes, oh, I don't know. Jesus might be mad if you ditch him.
I love it. Using the old
And
guilt.
yeah, that Irish guilt.
Old
So
Jesus guilt.
I let that sit with me overnight, and being the competitive guy that I am, I didn't want to have to look back and think, all right, well, if something goes wrong, I don't want to be able to point to that and say that was the reason. So I go back the next day and I tell the priest at school, like, I changed my mind. You can put me back in the schedule. I'm going to keep doing it. Sure enough, we won all of our games that year and for my middle school team. But so, going to church through high school and then even in college too, and especially during Beast, as you know, like that first summer, that ability to escape the craziness of Beast on Sundays. I mean, I remember I was bringing people to church that never read the Bible a day in their life, and they just wanted somewhere to go. But then I think through the football season, and we were fortunate that when we traveled, we always had a priest and a Protestant minister, so there was always mass on game day, which was important. And then throughout my time in the Army, my appearances at church got a little more sporadic because you're an adult at that point, and it's not like you're living in your parents' home and they're going to know and make you feel guilty if you don't go to church. So it was really on me, and I still went, certainly not as frequently. But then I think when I got home from Iraq, again, that's when I had the mental block of I'm fine. And then it was 2011 when I first started having some suicidal thoughts. And unfortunately, like, I still didn't get the help that I needed. I got like some sporadic help here and there, but it wasn't really anything that I absolutely fully committed to. And really one of the things that saved me was a text from a buddy, and that kind of was, I don't want to say a Band-Aid on a bullet wound because it was a little more than a Band-Aid, but not a full correction.
Yeah.
And then when I got out of the military and moved to where I live now in Hoboken, again, it was sporadic. But then it was when I really started having problems with my mental health. And I started going to see a therapist, and it just didn't feel like enough, right? It felt like in some ways I was just checking the box because I said, all right, well, I finally admitted that I'm really ready to deal with my mental health, and I'll do that. And I almost felt like I was going through the motions.
Of the mental health like therapy?
Yes, of the mental health therapy. It felt like I was kind of going through the motions. And then it was around the time that I met my now wife, and as we got closer and had more conversations, more real conversations, where I invited her in to understand what was going on with me, because it explained a lot of my behavior around her, my anger specifically, outbursts. And it was then that she encouraged me. And she's not overly as devout as some other people, but I think she recognizes that it is important to have that relationship with God. And she was the one who really encouraged me to get back to it. And I did. And I really, once I did that, coupled with my therapy, because it was it's kind of like practice versus working out in the weight room. Both are important, but for different reasons.
Yeah.
And both ultimately are working towards the same goal of being successful on a football field, to use that analogy.
Yeah.
And I think, that's when I really started to see an overall improvement in my just overall being, my mental health, my spiritual health, everything, is when I got back to it more consistently. And, so much so that it was important to me that we got married in a church. I had a wedding ceremony, but before that we had a wedding in a church. That was something that was important to both of us. Yeah. So that's really where I'm at now, that I'm starting this life now with a wife and we started off, so to speak, on a great foot. That
Well,
we
great
started off
foundation,
great
man.
foundation. Yeah, so
Absolutely.
that's where I'm at now.
Now, is your wife, is she was she raised Catholic as well, or?
No,
Yeah.
Christian,
Yeah.
less, I would even say non-denominational.
Yeah.
But her mother is very spiritual, and I think is a little bit more, to use your phrase, wears it on her sleeve,
Yeah.
a little bit more. And both of her sisters are religious as well. So I think it helps when you have that at home that you can
Yeah.
kind of look to and see as an example. And I think that goes a long way in making one more comfortable in doing that. And I've just found, and again, I think, everybody practices their faith differently. I appreciate and some people don't like this, but I appreciate the structure of the Catholic Church and the regiment of it.
Mhm.
I like things that I know what I'm going to get, and I know the times during the Mass that I'm going to have time to reflect on myself, and I know times when I got to pay attention to what the priest is saying up there on the altar. But overall, that has worked for me. It doesn't work for everybody. Again, I think what's important is that you find what works for you, because I think if you try to pigeonhole yourself into one method of practicing your faith, you could lose your way very easily, because you might be in a situation that doesn't fit your personality or where you're at in your life. And I think that's what I ran into in terms of my problem. But because in my head, it was, you go to church every Sunday.
Mhm.
And I realized after that as good as it is to go to church on Sunday and have that time to reflect and to meditate and pray, that it goes beyond that. And I had to find that out for myself. And in some ways, I had to find that out the hard way. But
Mhm.
ultimately, I found my way to where I am now. And I think I'm in a much better place than even when I was, growing up and being an altar boy and up there on the altar with the priest. So,
Well, there's a difference on, like, age, right? Age and
mhm.
wisdom. Like, now you do it, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but as a young kid, you're doing it because you're kind of being told, like,
Yeah,
this is what
no,
you have to do.
absolutely.
And now
Absolutely.
that it's like your decision, like that, and that's me, man. I mean, like, I cannot lie. I wish it was every morning. It needs to be every morning. I'd say I'm a 5 to 6 days a week where I'm in the Word first thing in the morning. I get up. I try to get up before everybody else in the house. That's my time. In the
Hmm.
house, make the coffee, Bible, daily devotional, journal. And I try to knock that out for at least 30 minutes. And that's my grounding, man. That's what I need each and every day to ground myself. Now, it's been more deeply and more held on a more regimented schedule when I needed it, or when I was so low. And not that I don't need it, because as soon as I start getting cocky and think I've got it figured out, that's when,
Right.
the wheels kind of begin to unravel, or come off, so to speak, on that front. I got a couple follow-ups for you, though. Is this one, when you were talking about going through your mental health with your therapy,
Hmm.
your therapist, and you said, I was going through the motions and it just wasn't going there. Is there do you feel like you weren't fully 100% transparent with the therapist? Is that one of the blocks?
That was part of it. Yeah, that was part of it. I was still, you can tell someone till they're blue in the face, this is confidential. But I think there's a mental block sometimes that you still don't want to share your most dirty laundry,
Yeah.
because that's embarrassing. It's
Yes.
again,
It's
and
full
that's
exposure of, like,
right.
your soul.
Right.
Yeah.
And, right or wrong, I have this image in my head of, what I'm supposed to be, what I'm supposed to represent. And that's very important to me. And not that, certainly, life's all about appearances, because it's not, but I believe it is important to set an example for who you want to be. And so for me to go in and tell a therapist, like, oh, I flipped out, got angry, and put a hole in the wall,
Mhm.
that's extremely embarrassing to tell. I mean, even though I've said it now, to say it to you, that, like, something like that's even, like, tough for me to say, because the way I look at it, it's like, damn, I'm letting Chad down by
Mhm.
letting him in on that. I let Chad down. And you are just one of many people that I think that. So
Now,
I
how is
was,
it now today, though? It's not that same way, or does that creep in every
no,
once in a while?
no, it's much better now, because I
Yeah.
think once I broke that dam, that, the water just,
Yeah.
started being able to flow. And I think once you do get over that barrier, then it becomes much easier. And what makes it easier is that you see how much more productive it is when you are able to really just be honest.
Hmm.
And you realize, like, this person that I'm meeting with and speaking with isn't judging me. And if
Right.
anything, they appreciate that I'm being honest, because
Yeah.
I think unless you're fully honest, you can't fully solve the problem. And that
Hmm.
goes back to what I said, maybe putting a band-aid, or, a bandage on a bullet wound. It might, in the short term, provide some relief, but ultimately it's not going to fix the problem. So once I stopped going through the motions and saying, like, oh, well, check that box, I went to therapy today, like, okay, I'm getting better, I'm doing my thing. Once I realized, like, this was something that I was going to have to work at, and not just show up to and then check the
Yeah.
box for 45 minutes, that's when I was able to experience some legitimate change and actually see the fruits of my labor.
Yeah.
And then that's actually what, keeps you going back, and
Yeah.
keeps you wanting to continue to improve. It's just like, if you practice, football, or if you practice your golf swing and you start working on something, you start to see, like, oh, the scores are going down on the golf course. Like,
Yeah.
well, I want to keep doing more and more of that. And that's, I think, my competitive side creeping in, that I see improvement. Well, what if I do X, Y, Z? Can I see even more improvement? So that's kind of how it ticks in my brain.
I love it though, because I think I love what you said. I love what you said about going in and doing the work. And I've described it the exact same way, of going in and doing the work, because I think for other men out there, other men, that kind of have similar paths that aren't there, haven't gone there yet. Immediately they think, oh, well, this is asking for help, and help seems weak from a male standpoint. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't ask for directions. I don't ask for whatever. Like, I'm not asking for this.
Mm-hmm.
And and that was part of it. I felt like a weak coward. I didn't have what it took to be a man when I first went into the VA. And what I realized is the suck that I then would go through for 6 months in there, every week for, a couple times a week, even at one point, it was the hardest mental work I had ever done in my life. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and learning from an educational standpoint, but then having to apply it and work on it and go home and write things out. And it was mentally, emotionally, spiritually exhausting. And it was one of the most challenging work things I had ever had to do
Mm-hmm.
when I
Yeah.
was finally real,
Right.
all the
Because
way to the
it's
bare bones.
right. Because that's the challenge, right? Is being that full, honest person with yourself. Because
Yeah.
even that, when you're just sitting there with your thoughts, I don't know about you, but at least for me, sometimes you even, like, block out things you did,
Yeah.
because that makes you feel better. Like, oh, I'm not as bad as I think. But
Yeah.
in reality, it's like, there's no one here, Connor. Like, why are you lying to yourself?
Yeah. Right.
What, just be honest, and you'll feel better about everything.
Well, that's, for me, it was described that I had avoidant behavior. I could avoid things like they
Yep.
never, like, to your point, like, I could avoid it so well, unfortunately, that I could almost make it like it never happened. And
Yeah.
I mean, while that is a survival technique, and God has given us that for some things to be able to focus, like I was talking about earlier, but then once the pendulum swings all the way through, we gotta be honest about that and address it. And that's what I'll say. I went in 2013 when I was getting ready to leave the FBI. I went to the VA as well, because I'm like, something's off. Like, I'm not satisfied with the FBI. I thought this would be the profession that I would be all into, and it sucks, and I'm not liking it. And I'm like, something's got to be off with me. So I went to, like, a therapist at the VA. And that's what I say in my story now, retrospectively, is I checked the box there. I went in, I was like, oh, I think I might have PTSD. And I shared what I wanted her to hear and what I
Right.
wanted to say, but I didn't go to the depths of it. And, like, of
Mm-hmm.
course I didn't get the outcome. And then I had somebody to project onto. Oh, well, I told her and she said I'm fine, so it's everybody else's issue.
Yeah.
Which is amazing in the journey that he takes each and every one of us on. My other question, because you asked me about Army football and like, was there that held me up a little bit? And the football team, because we're so close in the brotherhood, but I think it was more the institution of West Point. And that's my question for you, because character, so much is emphasized on character and, you know, the honor code and duty, honor, country, the motto and the honor code. A cadet will not lie, cheat, or steal, nor tolerate those who do. Well, we're lying to ourselves each and every day when we don't address those full problems and go full force on it. So we're breaking that. And I think, unfortunately, and I'm asking you, because what is your take on West Point? Does it put so much emphasis on character that it feels like a zero-sum game, that if you screw up once, you're screwed forever?
That's a great question. I've never been asked that before, but I think to some extent, yes, because I think there's the perception that we all have of each other, but then there's the public perception too. That, well, you know, these kids who go to West Point, they're the cream of the crop. They're the best of the best. They can't have bad judgment or make mistakes. And, you know, I'd like to think that, you know, by and large, we have individuals who are going to make better decisions than some folks at the same age. But then I think that it is almost a detriment to some extent, because if you try to be perfect, you're going to fail, because nobody's perfect. Right. So you have to find that balance between, all right, I have to uphold this reputation that I've created for myself, that my peers have created, and that the outside public has created.
And the institution.
Has created. And, you know, to an extent, rightfully so, like there obviously have been great people that have come through those walls. But I wonder, for all those big important names that we hear about, how their personal lives were in terms of what we're talking about right now, and if they felt like they made mistakes or they weren't perfect, but we would never highlight the imperfections, right? So we have to find that balance between, you know, attempting to be the best people that we can be, while also accepting and talking about times that we've failed. And I think that's tough for people who have gone to West Point, people who are competitive. So it really is a challenge to find that balance. And it's a part of that challenge is that you look around and you don't think that anybody else is going through any of the challenges that you're going through, and you're completely alone in those challenges, and everybody else that we know is perfect in every aspect of their life. And that's just not true. And I think as you get older, you grow to appreciate that and understand that. And especially in today's world of social media, where, you know, I joke with my wife, it's like, you know, we never post about the times we had a knockdown, drag out fight, argument, screaming at each other. We don't post that on Instagram,
right?
But we should, you know, right? Just to let people know that we're not perfect. So I think there's a lot of challenges that we face to uphold a reputation that we have for ourselves, and I don't know if that will ever go away, but I think there's certain things you can do that will make it easier on yourself, much like we're talking about today.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that character plays a factor, because character is so emphasized. And that's what I've come to terms with. It's like, you know, show me character development in the individual that gets up there and says, this is where I screwed up big time. Because character is not a zero sum. I've never failed in my life. And that's kind of the pedestal I was put on all the way up until 2017. I mean, and it kind of, and I'm not putting it on anyone else. I'm owning this. I think myself, even that pedestal and that pressure of being so compressed and not even knowing who I was really, or what my thought process was, because of all of this tension of like, I cannot let anyone know of any of the issues that I'm having whatsoever, because then I will just be like a balloon and pop and kind of imploded anyways. But, you know, how much further would we be And I don't know the development that I hope the character development that they're now at West Point or basic training or, all of our military institutions, are where we're having it where guys and gals can know that, hey, character is it doesn't mean, to your point, it doesn't mean you're perfect. It doesn't mean you'll never have a failure. You'll never have an issue. You'll never have a lapse in judgment, but it's when we can own it, take accountability, take responsibility from it, grow from it, and then help pass it along to others. Because I've said this and I stand by this. The adage of never make the same mistake twice. While that's good, I don't make somebody else's mistake once. But the only way we don't make somebody else's mistake once is because they share it with us.
Right.
And that's hopefully the path of this. If somebody can take a nugget from this, a nugget or two, and recognize you know what, I'm not going to wait until I implode. I'm going to go seek help now. And I'm going to be actually authentic and real and honest with that therapist that I'm getting ready to walk into.
Right.
That's the goal.
Yeah. I mean, I just think the analogy that pops in my head, you wouldn't want to, walk into a minefield once in your life and then try to avoid that again. You'd rather just know that minefield is there and avoid it altogether before you start tiptoeing through a minefield.
Yeah.
And I think that's really kind of, what in some ways that we deal with, being veterans and dealing with everything we've dealt with in the last 20 years in our military. I think there's a better than good chance if you served in the military in the last 20 years that there's a minefield waiting for you at some point in your life. It's just a matter of, am I going to walk through it and hope for the best, or am I going to try to identify it ahead of time and remove those mines so I don't potentially have the blow up?
Yeah. Now, what's your balance, Connor, on, because you said it, I like how you said it was almost like practice and then weight room. If I'm trying to perform for a football game or get ready for a football game, I have to go to practice to do, full team drills, 7-on-7, all that. But then I also have to go to the weight room to lift and condition and training room. And you kind of coupled that with mental health and then your spiritual journey. I love that analogy, dude. I think that's great because I'll go on the flip of that. Where I've heard some say, oh, well, I just take it to Christ. I just take it to Jesus and he's got it. And not that he can't do miracles. And I'm not, hey, he is God. He can do whatever he wants in anyone's life. So I will not refute that. However, I do think sometimes we can short side ourselves and maybe we're avoiding going in and having those painful conversations with another because, if God created everything and everyone, he's created another to help navigate that, who's smart, intelligent, and gifted in the talent of, mental health. So what does that kind of, double-edged, sword look like for you with mental and spiritual, growth?
I think it used to be 0 and 0, or maybe 0 and 20, in terms of zero attention to my mental health and only kind of 20% with my spiritual health. And, really, again, checking that box and just showing up to church and thinking that I was doing what I needed to be doing. And now I'd like to think it's more 50-50. I've made that commitment to both sides of the ball there because I've seen the benefit of both. So I don't think, you could probably make an argument that one's more important than the other. And again, one might be more important than the other for some folks, but for me, it's pretty evenly balanced. And I've found that the best portion of my life now has been when there's been that balance between the two, and that I put the effort and the focus on both. And I'd like to think, and I hope, and I will strive to maintain that balance because again, life gets in the way, scheduling gets tough and other things take priority, and then family and new jobs, or most people have a million competing things in their life in terms of what needs their time and their energy and their effort. And I think you have to be really conscious about where you put your time and not make excuses. Well, I don't have time for that because I have to do X, Y, Z. Well, if you recognize that the two sides that we're talking about here are important, well, then you'll figure out a way to make time and you'll work
Mm-hmm.
that into your schedule with all the other competing priorities in your life. And again, that goes back to what we've been saying about working at it. It's not going to just come naturally. I think it's not going to use your example, oh, God's just going to be there no matter what, which he will to an extent. But I think if you want to have that most fruitful relationship, you have to put the work in as well.
Yeah, dude, I can completely agree with that. And I also think that, I just think that we're having those conversations, and I go back to maybe what you initially said earlier on. Like, did you think there would ever come a time when we're having conversations like this? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, even 5 to 10 years ago, that we would be having the depths of these conversations, which I think is awesome, because I think they create connection. They create a bond that's deeper than a sporting event, or
Mm-hmm.
rallying behind a team, or whatever it might be. Even on the golf course, which I love golf, you love golf, I love that camaraderie, but like having these in-depth conversations, that's what forms connection and a bond with one another. And I love that that's where you know we can go on this. My question, I guess, for you, with Zero Blog 30, how often does spiritual dialogue come up in any of those interviews within the combat veteran community at all?
You know what? I would say almost never.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's due to the fact that the people that we've interviewed over the years don't have a spiritual side. It's just that we haven't. That's not our focus, which is why I think it's important that shows like yours exist to have that balance.
Yeah.
Because I think it would be. I don't know. What am I trying to say here? I want the show and we want our show to be productive for the veteran and the military community. And we've put our efforts and our emphasis on that mental health side and talking to
Yeah.
people and talking about that on our show. But I think that's where we need other shows like yours to pick up the slack on the other side of the house, because I have to imagine that the people who listen to our show would be interested in that aspect of their journey.
Some,
Um,
some,
some, not
right?
all, but
Yeah, it's not for everyone. It's not for everyone. I get that. I get that out the gate. That's what you and I were talking about. It can be very uncomfortable,
mhm,
because you're talking about the most personal, intimate area of one's identity. Where they put their identity, where they put their hope.
mhm.
Where they put their faith, if you will. So it can be, a little. I don't want to say controversial, but it can be uncomfortable, which is okay. I think that, to your point, that's why we need to have the depths of those.
Mhm.
So I appreciate you sharing that on that front, because I agree. And I also think it will be the combat veteran community that it can actually, like you guys, combat veterans in that room for Zero Block 30, and you are spearheading the initiative of having mental health be talked about. I
Mhm.
think it'll still be the combat veteran community that can spearhead, especially in men. I mean, outside of Tim Tebow, I don't see you know what, and Benjamin Watson, who played for the Saints, tight end. Like, outside of those two guys who are not pastors, like who are not like pastors or run a church, like there's not too many dudes out there. Men. I'm not even talking about combat veterans, just American men in general, that are like wear it on their sleeve and are like trying to have that dialogue, where I think women, and each guy I've had on here, almost to a man, traces back their faith being invigorated by their spouse or their significant other. I mean, I don't think that's a coincidence,
Mhm.
right? But men, we got to step up, because women are searching that. That's an attractive quality to females, to women out there, is a man who knows where his identity is and that he's on fire for the Lord. Like, that's not an unattractive quality for women, I don't think.
No,
And I think
not
it
at
can be
all.
the combat veteran community that leads that front.
Yeah, because I think too, and again, I'm speaking in generalities here, but I think the combat veteran community is seen as a quote unquote tough community and
Mm-hmm.
very very rough and tumbled and able to tackle the hardest of physical endeavors. So for them to then see that same veteran community having those tough conversations, I think is what allows us to lead the charge in both arenas, because people realize, because I also think, for as complex as we are as individuals and humans, we're still kind of simple too. It's like, wait, if I see the tough guy talking about the things that I think I should be talking about, well, then maybe it's okay. And I'm
Yeah.
simplifying that, but I think that's human nature. Like, you see, you think back to just how we've evolved as a society, and it's become more acceptable to have these conversations where guys like from our dads and our granddads generations, it was, you keep quiet, you put your head down, and you wonder how many people just battled demons mentally, spiritually throughout their life. Then they just felt, because of societal pressure, they could never talk about that, and how it probably robbed a lot of, I'll say guys, a lot of guys from a truly happy life, just because they were battling so many demons that they felt they couldn't talk to anybody about, and they couldn't let them out. So of course it's going to eat them away on the
Oh,
inside.
dude, you're absolutely right. I mean, rob them of joy, right? Of
Right.
true joy here on earth, of like
Hmm.
feeling that connection with others, and the ripple effect of it, the ripple effect of, you know, I mean, I remember, that's one of the eye-opening things was like, I wasn't extending empathy and compassion, like even to my kids at time. Not that I was like abusive or anything like that, but like just like, to Bryce when he was little, like, oh, suck it up, face out, drink water, take a knee. Like, no, like they need like compassion and empathy and to feel that from a father figure. And when you start your family and all that, that you've already done all of that work so that you
Hmm.
can carry on and you can share those emotions rather than just us being walled up and acting like it's the tough guy and that's the way we are. No,
Yeah.
people who say, oh, that's the way God created me. No, that's the way you're deciding to be.
Hmm.
That's the choice you're making to act like that. That's not the way he ultimately has created you to be.
Yeah.
Um,
And I don't know about
so
you, but for me personally, anytime I walk out of church, or walk out of a therapy session, I just feel lighter. So if I can impress that upon anyone, and everyone's going to have a different journey and different feelings, but I've never walked out of church or therapy and thought, that was a waste. I always feel better. I always feel like I'm moving in a positive direction. So that
Well,
would
yeah,
be
we're to
my.
share our burdens on one another and, share our burdens, share that with one another. And that's what we're actually designed, communal beings, to do that. So you're 100% right. There was one other point that I wanted to make, Connor, on that topic. Oh, don't lose it. Don't lose it, Chad. Don't lose it. I think I
Come
did
on.
lose it. Well, it was just, ah, it was good. It was good. But well, I think you're right on, when you go in and you share, when you're coming out and you feeling better from my chaplain down at the VA, that's what he used to say. He would go to a therapist. He would go, to a therapist. And he's like, why would you not? You get to go in, you get to share all that stuff, and it's lifted off of you. It's lifted
Hmm.
off of your shoulder. You're not taking it home. You're not carrying it into your household. And then you're bettering yourself in that front. So,
Right.
and then the final thing I wanted to say, and we'll wrap it up, was this is we're each uniquely given our story, right?
Hmm.
God created us uniquely to have our story. So I'm not ever trying to minimize anyone else's story because each of us is uniquely given one. But to your point, nothing new is under the sun either, as Ecclesiastes says. And because of that, nothing new under the sun, while it's uniquely ours, most likely somebody else is in a similar predicament, in a similar situation. And if we can be truthful, transparent, raw, real with those individuals, man, that will help them wherever they're at in their journey because they'll recognize that they're not alone either. And I think that's
Hmm.
key to having these conversations.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's interesting that you say that, because going back to, when you and I met, as far as I was concerned, you were like the example, right? And unfortunately, my Army football career didn't pan out the same way as yours did, and certainly didn't have the success that you had. But that was what I was looking towards as my North Star. It's like, well, this is basically what I want to do with my time here. And I didn't accomplish that, but I look back now and I realize that I took other things away from that experience, those 4 years, and that everybody does, in fact, have a unique path.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to figure it out for yourself, but share with others and speak about it, because someone might have somewhat similar of a situation. So although we didn't have the same path at West Point, we didn't have the same path in the Army, I think there's enough of a crossover that you and I are able to talk to one another and take things away from each other's experiences that we can then use in our own lives and our own journey to improve ourselves. So I appreciate you for that. If I've never told you that, I do appreciate you for that.
No, thank you, man. And I appreciate you for coming on here, Connor. I know sometimes getting asked in an environment today, and just regardless of environment, it's just, you're coming on being like, okay, like this is getting real. I'm going to go where I go. And you did that, and you were raw, transparent, real, man, which I appreciate. I got nothing but love for you, as you know that. And it makes me recognize that I need to put my priorities in place the second weekend of July.
Yes, thank you.
So that I get to see you in person. All right.
Yes, I look forward to it, buddy. Yeah, I miss seeing you around, so it'll be good to see you.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks for coming on today, buddy.
All right, thanks for having me, Chad. Love you, buddy.
Love you too. All right, folks. Hey, that was episode 13 today with Connor Crehan, obviously an Army football brother. And just, I didn't know that about Connor, and, him going to a Catholic school from K through 12, but then, him and his journey with mental health, but then also needing to dive back into his relationship with God, with Christ, as he went on that journey through there. So I hope you all enjoyed episode 13 today. And as I said at the top of the show, we will be putting this out in podcast form. So be on the lookout for that. I will make that announcement. Until next time, continue to fight the good fight.